Hi, Gary O'Neill. Welcome back to Intuitive Solutions. And today we're going to talk about the word obsession. And I know the first thing that comes to mind is something negative, but I like to think that there's a healthy side of obsession. And, it really varies. When you really look at people that are mildly obsessed about things to, insanely obsessed about things, there's a level of achievement and success that you can get out of that. And we've seen a lot of these successes through business and sports and things like that. When the first kind of names that come to mind are people like Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg, or in the sports world, we think of, Michael Jordan or Bruce Lee or Michael Phelps in swimming. And when you really look at those guys, I really think of it as not necessarily being obsessed, but being master practitioners and people that really go in and focus in on their craft. And I think the beautiful thing that people that have this obsession trait is that the fact that they wear blinders. They don't necessarily get deterred one way or another. They are focused on one idea and they are driven by it and focused to it with such clarity that I think a lot of us would look at that as very negative, because you do lose a lot, when you're that focused and driven on something. You lose friendships, you lose connections with your families a lot of times. And we're a nation that's always thinking about how to get work-life balance. And like I said in my post before, I don't necessarily think that's the right mentality, at least in the short term of being successful. I think trying to, have equal balance through all of those things is just very tough. But, you look at those guys and when you look at a Michael Jordan or Jerry Rice or Michael Phelps, their training, or Bruce Lee, their training is legendary. So what they do is they don't necessarily do things to be successful and be in the bright lights, but they have an internal mechanism that allows them to almost compete with themselves. Like Michael Jordan used to always say, I never really looked at another player to determine how good I wanted to be. He had an idea of where he wanted to be and he strove at it. And therefore he became, one of the greatest basketball players ever. And Bruce Lee was the same way. A guy, he didn't believe in form, but he believed in training and practicing every move to precision and as fast as he could do it. And I remember reading a story about him where his kicks were so fast that the filming at that time had to speed up to really catch his moves as they were happening, which is pretty phenomenal. So it just shows you how that type of obsession works. But it really hits me a little closer to home thinking about a buddy of mine here in Dallas. And, I would think some people might think he's insane and other people might think he's driven. And I happen to think he's a driven guy. And, he's really sacrificed a lot. He's a guy that, he's had this dream of being an entrepreneur and getting his ideas out there. And he's really sacrificed a lot. And I mean a lot, from social events, not being able to afford anything, to, having girlfriends, to being able to just go to all kinds of different events that me and you would go to, basketball games and things like that, to sacrificing amazing job opportunities that have been given to him, but he doesn't take, because he really believes that his ideas are so powerful that he is not willing to do anything that's going to deter him from doing that. And that includes, his family. And, he's getting closer and closer to his dream these days, and I'm really happy for him. But I see a spark there that I'm like, I want a little bit more of what he has, because he really just doesn't seem to see failure as a step back. He's almost like a great shooter in basketball where they never remember missing a shot. He tends to, hit a roadblock or an obstacle, and then he bounces right back with the same enthusiasm that he had before. And, the big lesson to me out of all of this is, how do we all just try to find that little area that allows us to be a little obsessive, that it really allows us to be even more focused and driven on what we want to do in life and what we want to get out of life. And I think if we can kind of figure out what that is and help define what that is, it's going to help us achieve our results. So, don't be afraid of being obsessed. If it's in the wrong areas, absolutely, you should be fearful of that. But look at your healthy obsession and try to figure out, how can I gear that So it helps me get driven and focused on a lot of results that I want to get out of life and outcomes that I want to get out of life, and use that to your advantage. Anyway, guys, great talking to you, and I will talk to you next time.